Welcome, Hallee.
Hello. How
How
are
are
you?
you? I'm good, thank you.
I'm good too. Thank you.
Maybe before we jump in, you can give a little introduction of who you are, what you do, and maybe how did you get into that?
hmm Yeah, so I'll keep my story shorter, but my name is Hallee. I am a short form video content creator. Sometimes I refer to myself as a content strategist because, along with my own content, I also help other entrepreneurs and I help brands to share their story and get better and get on short form video. So that's a little bit about what I do. What got me into short form video? Pretty much, I've always been interested in video. Since I was like 10 years old, I've been collecting my friends, writing scripts, filming and editing funny little movies that I thought were great at the time. And so then I found my way back into that on TikTok with short form video. And so now for the past year, it's been almost a year, which is crazy. I have been fully committed to short form video, learning all the ins and outs. And now I'm here. That's what got me into it. Now I like to teach other people what I've learned and am learning.
Okay. Um, I think when it comes to like content creation, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, well, maybe we can start with creating ideas, or how do you come up with ideas? Because like in previous episode that I had with Ruben, one of my good friends. He's an artist and musician, but he's also like engineer. So he has been in both worlds, like logic and also like art. And like we were talking about, like it's not that you just sit down and you just like generate like ideas and you become like creative and you just come up with like a lot of ideas. So how does maybe creative process works for you, where you come up with these like ideas for content, or how you actually like get them real and things like that? Because I think it's really important, that like creative side of like creating content.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's been a process of figuring out the best way to do it because when you're running a business and you're being creative, you have to be structured to an extent. But when it comes to being creative, it's always in flow.
Yeah.
I cannot think of ideas when I'm trying to be structured. Like if I say, Hallie, sit down and think of an idea for this, it just isn't going to work. It's going to be forced.
Yeah.
So a lot of times what I'll do is when I need to be generating ideas, I will put on a podcast or a motivational video or just some music. I'll go outside. A lot of times, this is how I force ideas. I get myself into intentional flow. So I'll go outside, I'll go on a walk or maybe a run. And then I know that ideas will start to flow. Another thing that I do is I just keep a running list of all my ideas because I'll be in the shower and an idea pops in my head. I'm like, oh, I can't forget that. And I write it down, put it in my phone, whatever it may be. So those are the two biggest ways that I come up with ideas, just kind of randomly keeping that list. And number two is intentionally putting myself into that creative mindset.
I think like for me, I always have I'm not really like creative creator, if I would say. But I'm more like into strategies, like being strategic, and like more like, I don't know, psychology, mindset, things like that. But I always have like well, phone is one thing, but also I have like a little notebook that I always carry with me, that I'm like, let's say I'm on a walk, I think of something, or like I listen to podcasts and I'm like, oh, this is interesting, and I have some question that I want to think about. I will like write it down, and then I have
Yeah.
like this notebook full of ideas, and it's so interesting to go back to them, or even like let's see how some ideas became real. Or I'm like, I like to create like minds, like kind of like brainstorm, where I have this question and I'm like, oh, what is this, and then what is this, and then you just like go down that. But I think that creating that flow, it's it's not something that you can just sit down or like even schedule ahead of the time. I think, where you're just like, okay, Friday from 5 to 7, I'm gonna be creative and I'm gonna like come up with
Yeah.
ideas. So I think it's something
Exactly.
that's like, I think one thing might be that, let's say, if you know yourself, you might know what are certain times of the day when you might be like more creative, but at the same time it's still something that you can't predict. um
Exactly.
and then like another thing, what you said about having, like, one thing is that all you do is create content, and that's something that I'm like, well, when I started making more videos, I'm like, wow, this is like a lot of work. Like it's not that easy. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, and my content is mainly just me sitting and like talking. Like, so in my case, it's more like coming up with content of like the structure of it or information that I give. And it's not as much like how you film, what kind of like angles or stuff like that, because it's just my face,
Mhm.
at least at this point. Um,
Mhm.
but then like there goes so much, and my brother, he's like opposite. He's doing more like entertainment, well, similar like you also do more that, like you do a bit of both, I think. um but there goes so much into that, just in that process of creating. So how do you manage to create on one side, but also like work with your clients and work on your business and like, let's say, network and all these things? How you manage to do all of that at the same time?
Yeah, good. Another good question. And it's actually interesting because that's something I've been really focusing on. How do I best do that while staying productive? Because it's been tough to figure out how to bounce between the two. Because if I have a day where I'm like, I'm creative and now I have to hop on a call and now I have to try and follow up with all these leads, but now I have to go back and edit some videos. It just kind of there's a lot of dissonance, and they're totally different mindsets that I have to get myself into. So what I've been working on doing is blocking out my time. So for example, for 3 hours on Wednesday, I'm going to be filming, and then for 2 hours, I'm going to edit, and then I'm going to come up with ideas. So basically what I'm trying out, actually, I'm testing this in the next few weeks. This is the first week I'm full out testing it. Is I have 2 days where I'm full out in business mode. I'm in sales mode. I'm on calls. I'm working with clients. I'm doing lead calls, and I'm on Clubhouse, I'm talking. That's 2 days a week. And then 2 other days a week, I'm going to be creative. It's going to be filming, editing, working out, collaborating, thinking of ideas, just trying to be in that creative state and not be in that
Yeah.
structured business mindset. And then the fifth day of the week, which I usually end up working at least a little bit every single day of the week, but weekday wise, will be kind of a hybrid of the two. So I'm going to be seeing how that works out. I think it is going to work well based on, I've been tracking my productivity, but you hear from a lot of big, well-renowned people that that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Batching your time.
It's funny because for me, actually, it's also like first proper week when I'm having similar approach, where like first 4 days, I am mainly like structured and organized, sales, business. But last 3 days, it's mainly like podcast, creative, filming, editing. So we are like
Mm-hmm.
trying out like similar things at the same
Yeah.
time. But
Yeah.
I know that like blocking works really well, even like when it comes to blocking your day. Like, let's say, one thing that I have seen with people is the struggle with like work and life balance, especially now when you're pretty much like working from home, and then you pretty much like it's one environment where you have to do all of those things. And like one
Mm-hmm.
thing that I have is that in the morning I have certain amount of time, let's say until like 11, that I can do gym, I can work out, I can read, I can do whatever I want for myself. And then during the day I'm working, and in the evening it's the same. Like I'm doing 75 hard, which is like 2 exercises. In the evening I'm doing the
Yeah.
exercise. So I'm doing exercise,
Okay. Yeah.
maybe reading, stretching, trying to stay alive with all this like workout thing I have going on. Which is like another thing I think, like, what is it that you're like training for? I have seen you posting about it.
Yes. So I'm training for the first one that I'm signed up for, and I have a team of, we actually had one other girl join, so there's 4 of us total now. We're training for a Spartan. We're doing the 5K on June 6th.
Wow.
And so I had this idea because I wanted to incorporate this athletic side of me into my content, because I felt like that was missing, because that's always been a huge part of my life. And like you asked how I was doing earlier, I think that this is a huge part of why I'm doing so much better, is because I've been active and training for this, and I have something to look forward to. I have this big goal, this physical goal.
Yeah.
And the whole message behind it that I'm incorporating into my content, and these other girls on the team too, a couple of them also do video and influencing, stuff like that, is inspiring girls, women, that it's not, you don't have to be just all pretty or just like tough.
Yeah.
So our hashtag is pretty tough. You can be both. You can go to the gym, sweat your butt off, be looking all tough and masculine, and then 5 minutes later, throw that makeup on, throw on that dress, and you're ready to go. You can do best of both worlds. So that's our whole message behind what we're doing. But it's been super fun, training really hard for it, because if anybody's never done a Spartan or seen what it is, there's a bunch of different lengths. We're doing the 5K, and then there's a bunch of obstacles, like really tough obstacles. Army crawling under barbed wire, jumping over fire, jumping into ice cold water. I don't know exactly which ones are on the course we're doing, but there's some pretty crazy ones.
That sounds like a lot. Like one thing that I'm now like working towards, well, I'm doing 75 hard, but like one thing that I work towards during 75 hard is something that I'm jealous of you being able to do, is like pull-ups. I have never been able to do one pull-up, like never in my life. And that's why for me, like since last year, so last year I finished 75 hard for the first time, and I got like really good results. And I was like, whoa, if I am able to get this much and get this much better in such a short time, what else can I get done? And then I was like, oh, I have never been able to do a pull-up. And now like I'm doing pull-ups like every day, well, assisted pull-ups, until I can do them. And it's like, it's a huge, like, I don't know, it has always bothered me. So also one thing that I know is that you have been in basketball. I also was training in basketball, by the way.
Really? You played basketball too? Yes, I did. That was my favorite sport.
Yeah, for me it's the same. I was in basketball for like almost 10 years, I think. And
what position did you play?
Center.
Okay, so you're tall. It's weird because we've never met in person, so I don't know how tall you are.
Yeah, I'm like 5'10", something like that. But like we were pretty short team in general. So but it was pretty fun because like it's, and then in camps, sometimes like some girls were able to do pull-ups, and I was always like, oh my gosh, I feel so weak, I can't do them. So now I'm like, I'm gonna get it done. So that's like one thing that I'm working towards. But like
awesome.
another thing I think that comes in with training is something that, one thing is that I think a lot of people say they don't have time for like physical activities, but at the same time, and I have noticed this within myself and other people as well, is that when you train first, you are training your mental muscle as well, because you have to be pushing
100%.
yourself.
100%.
And also your confidence goes up, which is really, really, really important especially when you're like trying to build your business, and you're like, most of the time when you start off, you're like one person team. And like I wanted to touch on confidence as well, because you work with people that are like trying to like build their personal brands or show more on like social media, which it isn't easy, especially to start. I think there's like big like wall that you're trying to overcome when you start, when you're like, oh my gosh, what will happen, people will see me, how they will react, like what, like all these things. So like maybe how do you help people to get that confidence to actually start like filming something or posting something and like showing them more online? Like what are the main things, or maybe the main barriers that you have seen people have when it comes to this?
Well, the first thing I'll say, back to your point on being active, get your mind right, that is 100% truth. If your physical wellness and your mental wellness go hand in hand. And I personally experienced this in the past 3 months. I was not in a good place mentally. I'd stopped working out. Working out was always a part of my life, and I was just going downhill quick. And the second I started working out again, my mental health has been so much better. So they go hand in hand. It helps motivate you, and it helps discipline you and get you in the right mindset that you need to do the work that you were meant to do. And I think a lot of people will say, I don't prioritize, or they say I don't have time, but really what they're not doing is they're not prioritizing the workout. They're not prioritizing their physical health, because everybody has the same 24 hours in a day. How are you spending it? How can one person have time to go work out, but the other person doesn't?
Yeah.
You have the same time. You're just prioritizing it differently. So that's one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is you can do anything, but you just have to choose wisely with what you're doing and where you're putting your time. So then when it comes to getting on camera, a lot of times people are very nervous. And I want to pull this up because I talked about this on a live the other day. And these words came straight out of the mouth of some of the people that I was looking to work with. So I want to find in my notes real quick exactly what they said. And so these ladies, I was giving a presentation and I was like, hey, so what is holding you back? I've talked to multiple people in this audience. What's holding you back? I know you guys want to be on video. And so the one thing they said is they're afraid that it'll be all for nothing. That they'll get on camera, they'll post it, they'll spend 2 hours doing it, and it's all for nothing. So what I said was, it's only all for nothing if you do it one time and then you stop. If this is something that's going to be helping you and helping your business and you're strategic on why you want to get on camera and start doing short form video, yeah, it might take you 3 hours the first time, 2 hours to do one video, and then you post it and maybe you're not super happy with the results. Okay, well, if you just stop doing it, then that was a waste of time because, well, you're quitting because not because it's not the right fit. You're quitting because you felt like it took too much time. When in reality, it's a learning process and you're going to get faster at it. And you probably know that because I see you've been jumping into the content, you've been grinding on that, and you've been staying super consistent.
I think consistency is one thing that I have been a bit slow on right now because I'm working on a few things on the background and I'm still like posting with podcasts. So that's one thing that I have been consistent in and I haven't missed like a week in it. But when it comes to content, it's something that I'm probably will look into like creating a bit more in like bulks. Otherwise it's the same as you said about the having that like creative and then you go into like sales and then you have like strategic planning. So that's one thing that I'm switching up. But I have been trying to like every time I try to get out of comfort zone. So let's say I had one person on podcast and she said that she's afraid of like posting videos or like stories. And I last week when I posted, that was one of the first times I recorded like video on story. And I sent her a message being like, I did it, your turn. So it's like, it's pretty much like also when you know somebody who is struggling, I'm trying to like lead by example where like if I'm scared of filming something, I know that somebody else is scared, I will do it. And then I'm like, I did it. See, it's really shit, but I still did it. So you can do it as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's the learning curve. The first time might not be perfect. And so then the second thing that people are a lot of times worried about, and these two, the second.
Oh wait, like before you jump in this one, do you think that the first one when they said that it's all for nothing, is it like, do you think that it's the actual reason? Because I think that it might just be the perspective because like, what do you mean it's all for nothing? You get out of your comfort zone. So that by itself isn't for nothing. Like you actually learn something about yourself, you get out of your comfort zone. Or maybe it might be some other reason, because I think if you do something that is actually helping you to develop, it's not really for nothing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Anything in general that you can learn from any circumstance.
Yeah.
And you can take that perspective. So you go through a hard time, you can look at it as, oh, woe is me, why me? Or you can say, hey, look, this sucked, I messed up, whatever it may be. But what did I learn from it? If you learn something from it, which you will if you look at it in this way, then it's not going to be something that you should regret or that was a waste of time, because it's developing who you are today, and you wouldn't be the same person if you hadn't gone through that experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever it may be.
Okay, so what's the second point?
Yeah, so I'm going to combine the second and third because they kind of go hand in hand, but it's people will be mean, so basically afraid of haters, and the third one is looking lame. So both of those are just mindset blocks.
Yeah.
Because like anything in life, you're never going to please everybody. And
Oh, yeah.
that's something I've had to learn the hard way because I've always been a people pleaser.
How did you learn it?
Just so I've realized over the past 2 years that how severely I have been a people pleaser my whole life, and how I just have worried so much about, like, oh, what if this person doesn't like me? What if I do something to be mean? You know what? Screw it. Like, I'm just being myself, and you're being the best person that you
But
can
like, did you
be.
take action despite that? Because I think that's a big, like, important
Oh,
point. It's not that you're a people pleaser now because of that you don't take action. You can still be people pleaser and take
yes,
action as you work towards, like, maybe becoming less
exactly.
people pleaser.
Oh, well, yes. And this is why I'm constantly learning in this regard with the haters. It still bothers me, and it's still something that I'm not fully past. But obviously, I'm so much better than I was a year ago.
Yeah.
I used to be afraid to post certain things because I was like, well, what are people going to say? What are they going to do? But the reality of it is anybody who's posting hateful, negative stuff on your post, they're in a bad place. A happy person will never try to bring anyone down, even if they disagree. They might, challenge you, but they're not going to slam you, try and bring you down, call you names, whatever it may be. So when you're getting these negative comments, you just have to remember that it's not about you, it's about them.
Oh, yeah.
And the bad mental state that they're in. It's not because you're doing anything wrong. You're just being yourself and doing what's best for you. And they're bothered because they're not in a good place.
I think, like, if you have your friends that are close to you, that actually know you, come to you and be like, you know what, this was a bit, like, then it's different. But if it's somebody who has nothing to do, they just sit online and they just, like, hate on people, like, that's way different than, like, somebody who actually knows you.
Yeah, I was actually talking about that the other day in a clubhouse room, is knowing and being able to distinguish the difference between hate and constructive criticism.
Yeah.
Because sometimes even a random person, and obviously a friend, if a friend comes up to you and is like, yo, like, what are you doing? This isn't you.
Yeah.
That's very different than someone saying, you have no personality. Why are you posting this video? See the difference?
People actually say that?
Well, yeah, that's a comment I've gotten multiple times on my YouTube videos.
You have no personality. I think, like, you actually have a lot of personality that you express in your videos. So
people are quite harsh on YouTube, not gonna lie. I just don't look at the comments if it gets past a certain number of views.
Wait, so what's the thought process now, like, when you see some negative comments? Like, what is happening compared to before?
Mm-hmm. So basically everything I just said. I like to, when I'm going into the comments of a viral video. So usually the hateful comments don't come until it hits a certain threshold of virality. So if my video gets, like,
that's funny.
Usually if it hits, like, above 100,000 views, that's when they really come out.
So, like,
I don't know, like,
the haters are
dark,
watching only the popular videos.
I know, exactly. I don't know. That's how it goes, though. And so when I'm going into the comments and I know that it's going to be where I'm going to see a bunch of negative stuff, I have to walk myself through that process in my head. Like, come on, Hallee, you don't care what other people think. Who cares? Put your wall up, be strong. Don't worry about what you're about to see. Look for the good in the comments. Now, there are times when I'll accidentally look, like I said, YouTube is the worst with mean comments. I'll accidentally look, and if I'm off guard, I'm like, oh, like, it'll get to me.
Yeah.
And someone said this in a clubhouse room, and it was so wise. It was, you're human. You're gonna see hateful stuff, and it's gonna bother you to some extent if you're wired that way.
Yeah.
But what matters is if you let it stick with you. So whenever, say, I catches me off guard, or maybe the wall I put up before I go in doesn't work, then it's just reminding yourself who you are and of the exact advice that I just gave right before, that it's about them. It's not about you. The hatefulness is nothing to do with you and everything to do with them.
Yeah. Well, they have enough time to actually hate on people. So that tells a lot about how occupied they
Exactly.
are.
Yeah, the book The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck says it
Oh yeah.
best. If you don't have time to give a fuck, then
Yeah.
you're not going to be hating.
Yeah, and like also I think like what you said about not the third point of like not wanting to look lame. I think that's where a lot of times because we see so much like perfection online, when you
Mm-hmm.
start to put yourself out there, you're like afraid of not things not being perfect. And like in a way, I know I have the same thing, but at the same time, I'm trying to post, let's say with the podcast, something goes wrong. I still gonna post it. Like I don't want
Yeah.
it to be perfect. Let's say, especially when you start, because I want people to see that like I'm a human as well. I don't have everything like figured out. Like last time when we
Exactly.
were trying to record, my internet was shit. So I was lucky that you agreed to like reschedule. But I was like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, like we booked the time slot, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're like keeping in mind that we have this, and then like there's so many things that goes behind that like make these like imperfect things come together. But at the same time, that's I still post like even like last episode, the internet was like pretty bad, but I went over it and I edited so that some like bits where it's like freeze, I just cut it
Mhm.
out. um
Yeah.
but it's something that I'm trying to embrace, where like okay, it's not perfect, but like I am working towards like getting better each time, and I learn lessons from those experiences. And that's something that I'm trying to like show people more, that you don't have to show up as like being perfect. Because I think when when you're like really really perfect online, a lot of times it's hard for people to actually connect with you, because like you don't show your human side, and the human side is actually what helps people to connect. So like that is one thing that I have definitely noticed.
I heard you talk.
Speaking of imperfections.
Yeah, I think that the Wi-Fi or your data heard you talking about it, because right when you said it was freezing, you froze, and it hadn't done it the whole time.
Yeah, well, that's just like to show a proof of things not being perfect. That's like real
Yes,
life
there you go.
presentation.
Perfect.
um Another thing that I wanted to ask you, maybe something that's one thing that I have noticed within myself, with starting to post more and film more. Like at like 4 years, I was really like I didn't want to film, I didn't want to post, I didn't want to like I don't like when people take pictures and things like that. But like one thing that I noticed was that when I would like every time I would listen back on my on like podcast recordings, and it really helped me to maybe change self image, because I was able to probably like for the first time actually see myself from the side. When you look at yourself as like somebody else, and you're like, wow, actually, like I was listening and I was like, oh, this is funny, and I'm like actually like listening and laughing at my own jokes. And I was like, oh, she's funny. But it's something that I didn't see until I started to actually post more. So I think there are good and bad things when it comes to self image and like social media or like posting and things like that. um like maybe there's something that you have seen within yourself about like self image and how you see and how it changed before you were like posting and after you have posting, or maybe have been like posting. And maybe if there are like any clients that have had like any changes in like this like thing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So what you said has so much truth to it, in the fact that when you see yourself as someone else, aka when you watch yourself on film or listen to yourself on a podcast, you're like, you see yourself from another point of view.
Yeah.
And if you have any negative self-talk in your head, like I definitely did, you listen to it and then you're like, wait, I'm not, like, why did I think I sounded so horrible? That sounded fine. And what's funny actually is I was on a podcast a couple weeks ago, and it was something a little out of my comfort zone. It was like a relationship podcast. I still haven't listened to it because I'm so scared to listen to
Oh,
myself
like
talk.
I think I haven't seen it. Like, did you post about it?
I did not post about it because I
Oh,
haven't
okay.
listened
Oh, okay.
to it.
I was like, I
Yeah,
haven't seen it.
but I've definitely gained a lot of confidence just by putting myself out there, because you realize that you are capable of doing it. And the biggest thing is when you keep the promises that you're making to yourself. That's when I realize my confidence boosts. And it's crazy. Ed Milet, I think, is the one that talks about that all the time. And I've been trying. So, for example, you set out a day with 3 to-dos and you get all 3 done. You're going to feel so much more accomplished than a day when you write 10 unrealistic to-dos that you're never going to get to in a day, and then you get 4 of them done, or maybe 5. So technically you got more done, but you didn't keep your promise to yourself. So you feel like you didn't do anything. You lose that confidence, you lose the belief in yourself, and then you go from down. And so that's one of the biggest ways that it's pushed me. In terms of clients, I have seen so much improvement. I have 2 one-on-one clients right now, and the one, she just hit 10K a few days ago, and the second one, she's about to hit 10K any day now, depending. It could be in an hour if one of her videos hits again or she gets another surge, but she's so close. And so they both came to me and were very, very committed, but they were a little bit nervous about getting on camera, what people are going to think. So it ends up being, and what I've found so far is, it's a lot of mindset behind wanting to produce short form video. It's not just, okay, yeah, I can teach you the techniques, but you're going to need that mindset piece as well in order to be successful and stay consistent.
So what is the mindset piece? Like, what it entails?
It really is just, number one, overcoming the fear of what other people are going to think. Because a lot of times, and I've noticed this in myself, if you do see a negative comment and you let it get in your head, or you let it stick to you, then you start to change your thought process and like, oh, maybe this isn't quite right for me, or maybe I'm not on the right path with these videos I'm making. So here's an example. People will comment on my Starbucks and Dunkin' series. They'll be like, oh, who are you to, like, you're such a basic white girl. Why are you doing this? Why are you going? Who cares about your name? And so if I let that get to me, I'm like, you know what? They're like, who does care that much about my name? But I mean, obviously I know it's a joke, but that is not the way I need to be thinking, because when you look at the people who are supporting, there are so many people that love those videos and would literally watch one every single day if I just kept making them. So those are the people you have to keep in mind, your supporters. Those are the ones that truly matter and will bring you up. So that is the biggest mindset that you have to overcome, is the fear of judgment, the fear of being uncomfortable or vulnerable. Being on camera and feeling like you messed up is a very vulnerable position to be in. Especially if you have somebody else filming for you, because then you feel awkward, or you can. So you just have to just get comfortable being uncomfortable and be comfortable messing up and feeling awkward. Because it's going to happen.
I think like another, like going back to the to-do list, one thing that I advise people to do is like, don't just write to-do list. You can write it, but then make sure you actually have time scheduled to get those things done. Like, it's not enough if you just write it down and just think like, oh yeah, I'll find time to do it. Like, actually schedule, look at your schedule and see if you actually have physically time for that.
Yes.
And like I think with posting, I think I just lost my thought. Okay. The mindset piece. I think when you get in front of camera, one thing that I usually think about when it comes, let's say, well, I don't really have as much like hate or negative comments. I'm not that big. But like when it comes to people that don't support you or give you hate or whatever, one thing that I have heard is you can create two lists. One is the list of people that support you and things they tell you, like the positive list that you can go to when, like, let's say you feel down or something like that. You can actually see all the positive messages, either like followers or clients or things like that. And something else is the negative list. So that is the list of people that you're like, you know what, watch me. you will see me go and
Mm,
succeed, I will
yes.
prove you wrong, and things like that. And I think it's good to have both, because for each person different lists work better, but it's a good reminder of, even like if you have these opinions that contradict, it means that you're actually doing something right, because you're not in this, like, I don't know, mediocre,
The
like,
people pleasing where
yeah,
you're trying to
exactly,
please
where you're just
everyone,
like
you're
trying
pleasing a
everybody to
certain group of
like you,
people.
and then you
Yeah.
end up not showing your like real personality, or actually being like more where you like stand out from the crowd. So I think it's a good reminder that when you start to get haters, you're actually being on the right path, because there are people that are like, you, well, this is like, oh, you have no personality or this or that. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, do they have any posts to actually show their personality, or they're too
Right.
scared to actually take that step, which is not an easy step. um
Yeah, and to that point with the people pleasing, and if you are changing who you are for certain situations in which, like I said, I've fallen victim to in the past, I've realized you attract the people in your life.
yeah,
So even for a little while you switch up who you are around somebody else, you're going to stop attracting the people that are meant to be in your life and the people that would come to your true self.
yeah,
And you're allowing these people that aren't supposed to be in your life to be there. So it's so important not to let yourself veer off and even for a second pretend to be someone you're not, just to make a situation more fun, make yourself more likable, whatever it may be, because then you're attracting the wrong people.
yeah. And also people can see that you're not being yourself. Like, I think at some kind of level we are able to sense if somebody is being real or not. And a lot of times you can feel it in your gut that somebody is like, well, they're not really being like themselves, or something is off with this person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like one thing that I have, I don't know, several times when I talk to people about like attracting people. I think if you want to attract better people, the best way how to do it is to actually start to work on yourself and make
Yes.
yourself a better person. And you're naturally gonna attract better
Raise your
people.
wavelength.
Exactly. And it's so crazy how it works, because like I think, like, I have had people ask me like, how do you attract like awesome people or like build your network? And I'm like, I don't know. Like,
Be an awesome
I
person.
yeah, like I just get in touch with them, we have a conversation, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome, like I want to stay in touch with them, and they most of the time they are the same, and I'm like, awesome, you're gonna stay in touch, like cool, like.
Mhm.
And for
Yeah.
me it's like, once I connect with them, it's not something that I'm just like, I will forget or not like care anymore, I think. It's like for me, once I connect with somebody, I check what I do, or let's say if I see somebody who has posted that they're like down or something like that, I will message them and things like that. So especially like when things are not going their way. When everything is awesome, I'm like, okay, cool. Like they're on their path. That's awesome. But like that's one thing that I have seen is that, and I don't know how I attract them. I just get in touch with people, I have conversation with them. But like one thing that I have noticed was, when you work on yourself more and you have these like toxic people in your life, the more you work on yourself, the bigger is the gap between you and them. And then naturally for you, it becomes less interesting to be around them. And at some point, you're
100%.
like, yeah, I'm like, I don't have time for this.
Yeah, you're just like, I could or I couldn't. I don't really care.
Yeah, like I think like when people text me that they want to meet up or like do something, usually my first question is like, what do you want to do? And based on that, I do have time or I don't.
Yes, exactly.
I saw like a gif or a meme about it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so me, because for me, like most of the time, like if I can help you, if I can add value, or if we can both benefit in some way, awesome. Like I'm all about meeting up and things like that. Um, but if it's just about like some random stuff, I'm like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Unless like it's something that, let's say, um going to play like basketball or something like that, which I don't do often anymore. But it is fun to just go and play sometimes. The last time I think I played was last August, I think.
Mm.
Um, but and I was dying. I was like the only girl there. I
Yeah.
was dying. um, but like, yeah, I think I am out of topics, most of them that I wanted to.
I could talk more on the two lists.
Yeah.
So going back to what you said about your positive and your negative list, there's so much truth to that. And I think when our first call, when you gave me that really good advice about the situation that I was going through, and I actually haven't publicly shared that yet at all, that person to me is one of the biggest driving forces behind I am going to be successful. And I think a lot of people have that person in their life who, whether they doubted them, it was someone who did them wrong, it was somebody who treated them bad, whatever it may be, using that is the biggest fire that's lit under my butt right now. And it will not die out. Yeah. And I will share my story someday when I figure out the right way to approach it. But anyways, in the good list side, it's so important to create what I've heard, what was the podcast? I think it was Ed Milet's podcast. I listen to his podcast all the time, about a highlight reel, having a highlight reel for yourself. So everything, all your accomplishments, testimonials, nice things your friends say to you, everything good that you do that uplifts you, keeping it in a document or in one place so that when maybe you do see some bad hate comments that get to you, go to that list, look at who you've positively affected, look at what you've accomplished, and then that's going to raise you back up where you were.
Yeah, like I think
both are equally as important to have, I think.
Yeah. Like one thing that I have noticed, even like with myself posting more, the very, very, very first guest I had on, Fatima, she's like my previous course mate and friend. And I've been telling her to share her story more because like she's so strong mentally. Looking at her, you would never be able to say that, but like she's literally like fighting for her life every day, and she never complains, like never asks for help. And she has been having like multi-drug resistant tuberculosis for like I think like 4 years or even more. And like that's one thing that like when I started to post, she said that she got a little bit more inspiration to post as well, because she was like, I know it's uncomfortable for you, or like you don't usually do it and I see you're doing it, so now I also want to do it. And I think it's many times like you don't, one thing is that there are people that are hating and things like that, but another thing is that which is one thing that I have on my whiteboard that I wrote in one, I have like marker that I couldn't like clean off. So it just stuck there. And it's like, you never know who is looking up to you. Like you never know who's actually looking at you and like getting inspiration from you, because a lot of times they will not tell you that. They are just like, wow.
I want to add to that actually, because I was talking about that to somebody else on a live the other day, is those silent supporters. Yeah. The people if you're posting and people are seeing your posts, there's going to be at least one person who's motivated by you doing something out of your comfort zone. So people think in the all for nothing, people will be mean, looking lame. To be quite honest, those are all selfish reasons to not get started, because it's about your own insecurities, which is fine.
That was the first thing that came in my mind when you said it's all for nothing. I'm like, you're just being selfish.
Yeah, it is. It is. That's such a good point, is that it is selfish, because who are you missing out on inspiring by not posting? Yeah. Who's not going to be touched by your message if you don't put it out there? Yeah. Because people will be, whether it's one person, whether it's 20 people, whether it's 1 million people, you're going to touch somebody if you're putting your voice out there.
Yeah, like that's definitely true. And I think that's one thing that I was a bit, I think, ignorant on very early on, because I didn't post. And I had people tell me like every time when I talk to them, they're like, oh, you're so like inspirational, like, and like I want to do more because of like things that I see that you're doing and stuff like that. But I wasn't too keen on like posting, because I think like a few years back I was posting like every day for like several times, and I was like, I'm not sure it's paying off. Even though like when I stopped, there were some people that were like, oh, like where have you gone? Like we miss you. And I'm like,
they come out of the woodwork.
Actually follow. Yeah, so like that was really interesting to experience, because like I was like, well, I'm just like posting. I didn't really see if like anybody is being influenced by it. If it because like most of the things that I do online, it's for other people. Like every post that I make, I'm like, okay, what is the message that can help somebody else, or something that I have learned that I it's pretty much like imagining that I'm posting something for my past self, or for somebody that might be in place that I was in, that they can benefit from that. And then it's like, well, then it comes like, I think at that time it was like, well, it wasn't even what am I getting out. I think it was more than that. I felt like I'm not really like helping as much people, or it's not like working out that well. But then I was like, well, people actually are asking me. So
Mm-hmm.
and then when I got back on, it's like, well, now it's like part of the job. I just have to do it. So,
Yeah. You gotta force yourself. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, it's so true though.
because like, I think one thing that maybe you can give a little insight on is how to keep posting, or how to stay like motivated to actually stay consistent. Because I think especially when you're like starting to take off, because like that is one thing that um I wouldn't say I'm not too consistent. I'm still like working on consistency. I think less because of it's more like because of the time management and just figuring everything out and like organizing it. But I think many times people have these like blocks. I know I had like years ago, even like until recently when I actually started to post again, I had this block around like posting. And then once you start posting, then like how to keep motivated to keep posting when you, especially at the beginning, when you have no like actual visible like results.
Mm-hmm. It all comes down to, and it was a rude awakening for me starting my business right out of college, because I'm naturally a very self-motivated person, but even that wasn't enough. The bottom line is, can you be disciplined?
Yeah.
If you Because motivation ebbs and flows. Motivation will be there one day and it'll be gone the next. And you can't, I mean, you can try to spark it, but you can't necessarily control, like, hey, I'm going to be motivated right now.
Yeah.
If you're not feeling motivated, then you're not feeling motivated. But what keeps you consistent is the discipline
Yeah.
to keep going. And on the point of consistency, it's also important to keep in mind when thinking about and knowing when it's right to make a pivot, and having the self-awareness to decipher, sorry, I don't know why it's so loud out there, having the self-awareness
Is it
to
wind?
decipher the difference. My apartment is extremely hot right now. They still have not turned the AC on, so I have to have my windows wide open.
Oh,
It's
okay.
still a million degrees here, and I'm right by the road. I'll pause so you can cut it. Anyways, um where was I at? Oh, yes. You have to have the self-awareness to be able to distinguish between the difference of, am I feeling unmotivated to do this and I just like don't feel like doing it? Or, okay, this actually sucks. This isn't getting me results. I hate doing it, and I'm going to redirect.
Yeah.
Because consistency is very important, but you don't want to keep doing something if it's not bringing you results, or if you hate doing it just because you said you're going to be consistent on it.
Yeah. I think like
So you
another
have to
thing,
be
like with the motivation and discipline, I heard really good um way how you can use both. So when you feel motivated, that's when you create a plan or a system to use. When you don't, like, pretty much like motivation is the beginning. So that when you're motivated, you just create the system that you will follow to be
mm-hmm.
like when you don't feel motivated. So like that's when you put in place these things that you will use to like stay disciplined. Um because I have had so many people that I talk to that they're like, oh, like I don't feel motivated to do anything. And I'm like, why would you even like rely on motivation? It comes and
Yeah.
goes. It's like it's not something that you can control. But discipline is the only thing that you can actually control. And with discipline comes a lot of like awareness and emotional control and things like that. And actually being pretty like planning things ahead. And really like working on yourself, because I think that's the main thing that can help to be like disciplined. Um,
Mm.
but like Yeah, I think that commitment part. Okay, so at what point do you know somebody knows that, okay, this is where I have to like change it up or do something else? Like at what point? Because I think when you just start off, most of the things you will not like because it's something really new. It might be like really uncomfortable. So at what point
Mhm.
somebody can make that decision of like, okay, this I have reached this point. I really don't like it. I'm ready to like change it towards something else.
Yeah, so there's two things that really play big into that. And number one, like I was saying, self-awareness, knowing in yourself knowing how you react to things. So I know when I'm starting something new, how I'm going to react to it. And so if you understand the way you react to things, then you can distinguish the difference between, am I just unmotivated and I need to be disciplined now, or do I actually hate doing this? I need to like do something else. So number one is self-awareness. And I just lost my train of thought on the second one. Um,
I
can
think
you say
one
again?
thing that I mentioned like in one room that I was in is to just set like certain maybe time or something like that where you actually have this like test time. Um
Oh, I remembered it.
yeah, okay.
So number one, self-awareness. Number two being, what is your why behind doing it? Because if you start, say, like for me, my personal mission statement is to live an intentional life that I love and inspire others to do the same. So when I'm doing something and I'm making a decision, if I need to reroute, whatever it may be, does it work? Does it go along with that mission statement? Do you have these checkpoints and different things that you can look to as North Stars to guide you in your decision making? Because for example, say you start short form video. Why are you starting short form video? Because you are trying to get leads and you're trying to educate people. That might not be exactly what
Yeah.
your why is, but
I
for
think it's
example
like
sake,
most people's why when they do it for their business.
yeah, for example sake, and you were saying, yeah, I just have to do it because it's work. Maybe
Yeah.
you don't love doing it, but you know that it's getting you results and you know why you're doing it. So you're not just gonna be like, oh, I hate doing this one day. I'm just not gonna do it anymore because I'm just sick of
So
it.
like that's the thing, I actually like doing it. It's just a time consuming piece of it that it actually takes so much time with all the editing and things like that, where at some point I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so long.
You need
Especially
to
like
learn to
when I
out.
start off and I'm like really new at all the editing and things like that, then I'm like, oh my gosh. But it is something that's like, I think always things that you learn. I do enjoy like creating content and coming up with things to like post. It's just about actually taking the time to create them, film them, edit them, and do all this like creation part of
The
it.
grunt work. Yeah, exactly.
But job has to get done, so
Exactly.
uh,
Until you can hire someone to do the
yeah,
grunt work that
exactly.
you don't want to
Yeah,
do.
exactly.
The
Maybe you
things get
can tell people like where they can find you or where they can get your services and things like that.
Yeah, so I am on primarily my entertainment accounts, right? So TikTok and YouTube, that's where most of my entertainment content lives. So if you want to check that out, skits, vlogs, just kind of
Right, what is
lifestyle
skit?
skits. So when it's just like me playing characters
Oh,
back
okay.
um those, so TikTok and YouTube, Hallee_Smith is my username. My Instagram is where I do some business. I also post some of my entertainment content. That's where a lot of people reach out for consulting. In all of my bios on all social medias, Hallee_Smith. The link in my bio has all my resources, all my ways to contact me, everything that you need to know. You can set up a call. You can check out my website. And then third and fourth, LinkedIn and Facebook. You can also find me on just my name, Hallee
Yeah.
Smith, and I'm actively posting on all those platforms. So yeah, I would love to get connected. And if anybody listens to this and wants to shoot me a DM on Instagram, feel free. That's the best place to DM.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, well, this was awesome conversation.
yeah. Thank you.
I think it's always
having
Great to
me.
have conversation with you. You have like awesome energy and I can always learn from you. So
Same for you. Same for you. You gave me some really pivotal relationship advice.
which is ironic because I'm currently not in a relationship.
Hey, me either, but I can definitely spit off some
Yeah.
relationship advice.
Usually people that are not in a relationship are the best relationship advisors.
For real, because they've been through it.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming. And well, best of luck with all your business endeavors.
Yes, you too. Talk to you later.